Where does the legitimacy of state power lie? This is a very difficult question to answer.
On one hand, without the state, the society as we know it cannot exist. We will be forced to fend for ourselves, concentrating all our efforts on collecting and preserving what we need to survive from scarce natural resources.
To obtain the benefits of society, we need to accept some form of state power. The problem is that we seem to have no choice. We are compelled to accept state power, not only because most of us cannot leave, but more importantly, because the state has the power to force us to accept it. If we do not wish to comply, the state can threaten us with violence to make us change our minds. If we resist and disobey, the state has the power to use actual violence to compel us to comply. But doesn't this morally equate the state to a benevolent bandit, offering us benefits with one hand while threatening us with the other? The root of the issue lies in the idea that individuals have a moral right to freedom. If someone threatens you with violence if you refuse, thereby forcing you to agree to something, then you are not truly making a free choice.
The ideal of personal freedom, also known as liberty, is one of the cornerstones of modern Western ethics and political philosophy. How does freedom align with the idea that the state's authority over us is legitimate? Firstly, freedom is limited and we do not possess the moral right to absolute freedom.
You can't poison someone's food just because you don't like them.
You cannot steal your neighbor's crops just because you forgot to cultivate your own field.
Generally speaking, our freedom does not include the right to harm others.
Liberal philosophy is precisely based on this limitation of freedom to establish the legitimacy of state power. If the laws of the state are solely to prevent individuals from harming others, then these laws are completely consistent with individual freedoms. In this case, prohibiting someone from doing something does not mean infringing on their freedom, but rather a reasonable definition of freedom. English philosopher John Stuart Mill defended this viewpoint in his book On Liberty. He wrote, "In a civilized society, the only reason for which power can justifiably be exercised over an individual against their will is to prevent harm to others." This viewpoint is known as the harm principle and has had a profound impact. The harm principle depicts the ideal form of a liberal state, where the only function of the state is to protect and promote the freedom of its citizens while preventing harm between individuals. Beyond that, interfere as little as possible with individual freedom. It is noteworthy that the harm principle does not permit the state to intervene coercively to protect individuals from self-harm. Mill points out clearly that a person cannot be compelled to do or not do something merely because it would be more beneficial to him, make him happier, seem wiser, or even be correct in the eyes of others. These reasons can be used to persuade, convince, or even plead with him, but they cannot serve as a justification for coercion, much less to impose punishment if he does not comply. Of forcing someone to do something for their own benefit is a typical paternalistic approach. Mill considers this practice unreasonable because it implies that the rulers know better than individuals what is beneficial for them. For children, or those unable to care for themselves, such intervention might be justified. However, for most adults, Mill argues that no one knows better than the individual themselves what is in their own best interest. The harm principle specifies that the law is only justified in preventing an individual from harming others. However, not all laws aimed at preventing harm are legitimate, because some laws, while attempting to prevent one harm, may lead to greater harm.